Once upon a time, on the busy streets of Ibadan, lived a beggar who never really begged for money. He sat on the same spot every day, quiet as he watched the people go about their activities. People often dropped money in his rusty bowl, thinking that he was just another helpless beggar trying to survive. However, he never took their money or even begged for it. When night came, he simply stood up, brushed the dust off his clothes and walked away, leaving the money for whoever was interested in having it. In fact, a young man named Kunli always looked out for the money, knowing that the beggar had no need of it. Kunli usually laughed whenever he saw the poor beggar leave. He believed the beggar was mad, because how on earth would a beggar sit and beg for hours, leaving the money for another to enjoy? What Kunle did not know was that the beggar did not need the money. He was after something else, something more valuable than money that people were giving to him freely without even knowing. Every morning, when people passed by, the beggar would look up slowly and ask in his raspy voice, "What is your time?" It sounded harmless to almost everyone that he asked. Most people assumed he meant the time of the day, so they answered without hesitation, saying, "It's 8:15 a.m., it's 12:45 p.m., it's 4 o'clock. They would smile politely and continue on their way, never realizing that with each innocent answer, they had given something away, something they could never take back. One morning, a young woman named Folu was standing at the junction, waving frantically for a bus to take her to the bank. She had made a terrible mistake earlier that morning by transferring 500,000 naira to the wrong account. Her hands trembled as she clutched her phone, worried that the receiver would withdraw the money. Folu paced anxiously as she waited for the bus to arrive. That was when the beggar, sitting by the gutter, lifted his head and asked her the question. "Madam, what is your time?" he asked Folu, who ignored him at first, her mind too occupied with the problems at hand. The beggar repeated himself, louder this time. "What is your time, madam?" Irritated, Folu turned towards him and began to yell angrily. "Please, I don't have time for all this. I have more pressing issues at hand." However, before she could finish talking, the beggar began to cough violently, clutching his chest as if he was in extreme pain. Guilt pricked her heart as she decided to tell her time. Okay, she sighed. "It's 9:17 a.m., she said to the beggar, whose cough stopped instantly. He raised his head and gave her a faint smile as Folu nodded and got on the bus. She arrived at the bank a few minutes later and met with the customer care representative, who informed her that the money had already been withdrawn. Folu froze. Her heart sank as her mouth went dry. "Withdrawn? How? I came as fast as I could." The rep informed her of the next steps to take, and Folu left the bank feeling so defeated. She arrived home hours later and met her husband, who seemed so angry at her for making such an expensive mistake. For months, he ran around trying to get this money to ensure that they paid for their children's school fees before their exams began. "Folu," he shouted the moment she stepped into the house. "How could you be so careless? Do you know what I went through to gather the money?" Tears streamed down Folu's face. "I'm sorry, Lanre. I swear, it was a mistake. I've been to the bank." "Enough!" he snapped, throwing his hands in the air. "You've ruined everything. Just go inside. I don't want to talk right now." Folu went into the bedroom and sat on the bed, shaking uncontrollably. She had no idea what she was going to do. Her uncle warned her never to come to his house to beg for money again, after he tried to sleep with her but failed. Her husband, who worked for her uncle, lost his job because of this. That night, she could not sleep. Her mind raced as she thought of what to do. Finally, she fell into a very deep sleep and saw the beggar, who approached her with a knowing smile. Folu stood before him as he stretched out his hand and whispered something that filled her with fear. "You gave me your time, so get ready to leave." When Folu woke up, her bedsheet was soaked in sweat. Her pulse raced wildly as she clutched her chest in terror. By morning, she could barely stand. Her husband Larry noticed how weak she looked and asked if she was sick. Folu nodded her head weakly and revealed to him that she didn't know what was wrong. "I don't don't know what's wrong with me. My body feels so strange and weak. Larry sighed in frustration. Folu, please, not now. I already have enough problems at hand. He grabbed his bag and stormed out of the house, slamming the door to her face. Folu stayed at home alone, trembling with weakness. Each time she went to the restroom, her heart sank. Her urine was deep red, thick like blood. It was as though her very life was slipping out of her body drop by drop. Folu collapsed over and over again, and each time she saw the beggar in her subconscious, standing in the same torn clothes, drinking from a cup. When she tried to speak, the beggar would whisper the same words that terrified her. You gave me your time, so get ready to leave. Each time she woke up, she found herself weaker. Her skin turned pale, her fingers trembled as if they no longer belonged to her. Soon she could not walk. The neighbors stopped visiting. Even Larry could not bear to look at her anymore. Folu, he said one evening, his voice breaking as he spoke. Whatever you've done, may God have mercy on you, he said to Folu, who was now in so much pain. All she could think about was the beggar and his haunting words echoing in her mind. You gave me your time, so get ready to leave. Every night, Folu would wake up screaming. She felt her body grow colder, her breath shorter, and her pulse slower. Sometimes, she would hear footsteps pacing around her room, even when she was alone. Lanre stopped sleeping beside her because of the foul smell that now emanated from her body. Folu was now a shadow of herself, and this all began after she told the time to the beggar. Folu decided to speak to her husband about it. She narrated all that happened to him, but Lanre found it hard to believe. How can you say a beggar took your time? He snapped, his voice shaking with disbelief as he began to yell at her angrily. Folu, please stop this madness. You need a doctor and not all these cock and bull stories, he said to Folu, who grabbed his arm, her tears streaming down her cheek as she cried out to him. Larry, please, you have to believe me. The night after I told him my time, he came to me in the dream. He said my years were no longer mine, and since that day, I can feel something drinking my life away. Larry pulled his arm free, trembling. Enough! I won't sit here and listen to this dumb talk, he said as he stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard that the sound echoed through the house like thunder. Folu did not know what to do. Her husband did not believe her, and worse still, her strength was now fading. Sometimes, she saw the beggar standing at the foot of her bed, watching silently as her life drained away. Folu was not ready to die. She had to confront the beggar to get her time back. She pleaded with her husband to take her to the popular junction, the same place where she told the beggar her time. Her husband looked at her like she was mad. You want to go out there and disgrace me for the world to see? He asked Folu, who pleaded with him to take her there before it was too late. Lanre could not stand his wife confronting a beggar by the junction. He warned her fervently never to entertain such thoughts in her mind, but Folu had her mind already made up. She stood up with the last ounce of strength in her body and began to head to the door when Larry rushed ahead of her and locked the door. I won't let you disgrace me, he said repeatedly as Folu watched him sit on the chair unbothered. Larry brought out his phone and began to scroll through social media, ignoring his sick wife, who pleaded with him to open the door. Folu dragged herself towards the door, her body trembling like a leaf in the wind. Larry, please open the door, she cried weakly. I'm dying, and each second is important to save my life, she said to Larry, who ignored her as he scrolled through his phone. Folu's voice cracked as tears streamed down her cheeks. Larry, I need to meet the beggar at the junction. He's not just a beggar. He takes people's time, and I gave him mine without even knowing it. Please, don't do this to me. I don't want to die, she said to Larry, who scoffed and informed her that she sounded insane. Folu, defeated and weak, decided to return back to her room. Each step heavier than the last, her heart felt like it was slowing down. Her body ached as though something unseen was pulling life out of her one breath at a time. She lay on her bed and stared at the ceiling, tears streaming down her cheek as she pleaded for God to forgive her. Then she heard the faint whisper of the beggar, informing her that her time had come. Folu's lips trembled as she began to beg for her life. Please, not yet. My children are still in boarding school. Please, let me see them again, even if it's for the last time. She pleaded weakly, but there was no answer, only silence. Folu took one final shaky breath, her eyes rolling upwards, her hands fell limp by her side. When Larry finally looked up from his phone, he noticed the house had gone unusually quiet. No more coughing, no more crying, only the faint hum of the ceiling fan. Folu, he called out repeatedly, but got no response from her. Larry stood and walked towards the bedroom. He found his wife lying still on the bed, her eyes open, her lips slightly parted, as though she had tried to say something before her final breath. Folu, he whispered, shaking her shoulder and pleading for her to wake up, but Folu did not move. Larry fell to his knees beside her bed, screaming her name. No, Folu, please, don't do this to me, he said repeatedly as he shook her shoulder and began to cry. However, it was already too late, as his wife Folu was already dead. Larry began to regret why he never listened to his wife. He began to regret how unkindly he treated her and how he never even tried to help. Weeks passed and Larry buried his wife in pain. The neighbors whispered amongst themselves, saying her sickness was strange, too sudden and too unnatural. Larry sat beside her grave long after everyone else had gone home, haunted by the memory of her final words. He takes people's time. He could not eat. He could not sleep. Every tick of the clock reminded him of her voice, trembling, terrified and desperate. Finally, one sleepless night, he opened his laptop and typed into the search bar, "beggar asking people for time in Ibadan." Within seconds, dozens of videos appeared, one after the other. He clicked through them. People recording short warnings, shaky footages, and local news reports. If you ever meet a beggar asking for your time, run, no. This was what they said. Larry's hands trembled as he scrolled through countless stories, photos of people who had mysteriously died, every one of them connected by one strange detail: the beggar asking questions about the time. He slammed his laptop shut, breathing heavily. His mind replayed every word Folu had said, every plea he had ignored, every tear she had shed. Larry grabbed his phone and headed straight to the junction. He met the beggar, sitting there quietly as if he could not hurt a fly. He studied the beggar closely and decided to expose him for who he truly was. The next morning, Larry disguised himself as a madman. He sat close to the beggar and watched him closely. For 2 days, Larry pretended to be insane, muttering to himself, sleeping on a carton by the gutter, and rubbing dust on his head to blend in. No one paid attention to him, as everyone simply thought that there was now a madman sitting at the junction. But Larry was not just watching, he was observing. He noticed that every time the beggar asked someone for the time, he sat down and stared into a mirror, repeating the spoken time 3 times. The person who gave the time would always scratch their neck and stumble slightly before continuing on their way, unaware that something had been stolen. By the 3rd day, Larry heard the beggar mutter something underneath his breath. No vacuum must exist. No vacuum must exist. The beggar muttered softly, his cracked lips barely moving. Larry froze. The words were strange, almost whispered like a warning to himself or a rule of whatever dark power he served. Each time someone told the beggar their time, he would repeat it quietly, then say again in that gravely voice, "No vacuum must exist. Time taking must be replaced." Larry realized what it meant. The beggar could not take unless someone gave. The transaction only worked if a living voice surrendered the time willingly. Larry returned home that night worried as he thought of how to defeat the beggar. He held his wife's picture as he cried out, apologizing to her for not believing all that she said. Larry curled himself up in bed and cried himself to sleep. His wife Folu appeared to him in the dream and told him what to do to defeat the beggar. She instructed him to watch her old videos. Folu once had a vlog where she posted videos of herself. She told Larry to pay attention to the end of her videos, as there lies the answer that he seeks. Larry woke up from his dream startled. He had always mocked his wife for making videos online that no one was watching. Larry watched her videos as tears poured down his eyes. He arrived at the end of the video and realized that his wife always ended her videos by saying the time. Larry in that moment knew what he had to do. He cropped out the parts where she said out the time and amplified the volume to make it more audible for one to hear. He saved the recording on his phone and waited patiently for the break of dawn. By sunrise, the sky over Ibadan was grey and restless, as though the heavens themselves knew something strange was about to happen. Larry dressed neatly that morning. No disguise, no madness, just a simple man with grief in his eyes and purpose in his heart. He wore a clean shirt, the same one Fulu had once ironed for him on a Sunday morning. When he got to the junction, the beggar was there, sitting on his usual spot beside the gutter, cross-legged, head bowed, his cracked bowl before him. The sight of him made Larry's heart pound, but he forced himself to stay calm. Larry loitered nearby, pretending to scroll through his phone, praying silently for the beggar to approach him. He waited 10 minutes, but nothing happened. Then, just as he began to lose hope, he heard that familiar rasping voice behind him. "Young man, what is your time?" Larry froze. His throat went dry as he turned slowly and looked at the beggar in the eyes. Larry did not say a word. He simply reached into his pocket, his hands trembling as he brought out his phone. From the small speaker came a soft feminine voice, calm, gentle and almost alive. "It's 11 a.m., the voice said repeatedly as the man began to yell out in pain. Everyone gathered as they wondered what the problem could be. They watched in shock as the beggar fell to his knees and began to scream. He confessed how he was part of an occult where the lives of people were exchanged for money. The beggar was not a poor man. He had mansions and businesses all over the country, but had to steal the life of others to live longer. Every year, he chose a state far away from his home state and lived on the streets as a beggar to steal the life of innocent people. This was something he had to do as part of his occultic duties if he ever wanted to live and enjoy his wealth. However, there was a warning that he could never ask the same person for the time twice. Once a person has told him their time once, he can never obtain the time from the person a second time, as this could lead to his untimely death. When Larry used his wise voice to answer his question, he set the beggar up for his own death. They all stood there and watched as the beggar confessed to them the deeper meaning of his question. He revealed to them that "what is your time" means a completely different thing from the question "what is the time?" "You all think I asked for your time," he said, his lips trembling. "But no, I asked what is your time. There is a difference, one you never understood." The people murmured amongst themselves. Some stepped back in fear. The beggar's eyes darted across the crowd as he continued to speak. "When I ask what is your time, I do not mean the numbers on your wristwatch," he continued. "I mean your years, your life, your remaining breath, your fate written in the sands of eternity." He pointed a shaky finger towards the sky. "Each time you speak your time aloud, you give a piece of it away. The sound of your voice binds your life to the number you speak. That is the law that governs existence, because time cannot be measured without being taken." The beggar laughed, a terrible broken laughter that sent shivers down their spines. "I was chosen," he said, "to collect the hours people wasted, to feed on the seconds they did not value. The more you live without purpose, the easier it is for me to take what you do not guard." Larry stepped forward, trembling. "So when my wife said the time, you did this to her?" Her clock stopped. The beggar finished for him, smiling faintly. Her voice gave permission. Her soul became mine. They looked on in terror as the beggar screamed out in pain like one whose essence was being ripped out by force. "But today," the beggar groaned, "the chain is broken. The voice you brought to me, young man, it is not of the living, and I cannot take from the dead." He looked up at Larry with eyes full of pain and fear. "You have undone that which was sealed long before your birth. You have freed those whose hours were stolen." Then he whispered his final words, words that will haunt everyone for a very long time. "Guard your time, for those who waste it feed people like me." With that, his body collapsed to the floor as the people all screamed out in terror. Larry fell to his knees weeping as he wished that he listened to his wife and sought help when she still had some time. From that day on, no one in Ibadan or anywhere else ever answered a stranger who asked, "What is your time?" because now they knew that some questions were not meant to be answered. The lesson to be learned from this story is that life is much deeper than we could ever imagine. Be careful of who you give access to your life and never take things for granted. Life and death lie in the tongue, and sometimes the simplest actions or responses can open unseen doors. Many people lose precious things not through violence, but through ignorance and carelessness. Be discerning, be prayerful, and be cautious, because not every smile is harmless, and not every question deserves an answer. Most importantly, value your time and your life, for once it is given away, it can never be taken back. I hope you enjoy.